Well, transgender bills aren't the only thing making waves in America. No, we now have a border security bill. $118 billion worth of border security bill, which actually miraculously does not just include money for America's own borders. You couldn't make this up. Here, joining me now, very gratefully so, is Michael Knowles. You'll all know this guy, of course, the absolute star of the Daily Wire and the host of the appropriately named Michael Knowles Show. Michael, thank you very much. $118 billion. The highest proportion of it is going to Ukraine. What's going on?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be with you. I suppose I have to correct your English, though. Maybe this is a distinction between the UK and the US, but you've used this phrase, border security bill, which would not apply to the bill before Congress because the bill does nothing to secure the border. Actually, all our border security bill does is open up the border. So perhaps the illiteracy here is on the part of Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, but whoever came up with this silly phrase, it certainly doesn't apply. The bill has somehow managed to lower my estimation of Republicans in Congress, which I thought could not be any lower. As you point out, a lot of the money goes to Ukraine. Then the rest of the money goes toward letting in even more illegal aliens, along with more legal immigrants as well. The only purpose of the bill is for Joe Biden to be able to share some of the blame for this deeply unpopular migration crisis with Republicans, and of course, leave it to the Republicans to do everything in their power to take the bait.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that the US border could be temporarily shut down if encounters with migrants exceed specified limits. I mean, you guys have got thousands of people coming across your border every single day. I mean, what's the specified limit?
I'll tell you exactly what the specified limit is. Presently, I remember a few years ago when there were 2,000 migrants coming across the border a day. We said this was an unprecedented historic crisis, a national emergency, an invasion, for goodness sake. What this bill would do was would set a specified limit at 5,000 per day for 7 days. So you would need 35,000 illegal aliens registered as coming across the border per week to begin to exercise this authority to shut down the border, or you would need 8,500 in one day. But it's even more ridiculous than that because the president would only be able to exercise this authority to shut down the border for a handful of days per year. So the net effect of this would be, among all of the other tripe in the bill, would be to massively expand illegal immigration, which is what the Democrats want in the long term because they think it will give them a permanent electoral majority, and they might be right about that. In the short term, what they want to do is cast some of the blame off to Republicans. Mercifully, the conservatives in the Senate and the conservatives in the House have shut this down, but the squishes on the right are still trying to bring this across the finish line.
I just find this absolutely remarkable. Presumably the American public don't actually want this.
Certainly not. This issue of mass migration is probably the single biggest motivator of conservative voters in the United States, and not just in the United States. In your own country, obviously, migration was a major driver of the Brexit. In Hungary, it's led to the popularity of Viktor Orban. It led to the election of Giorgia Meloni in Italy. It's led to conservative movements in Spain and Germany and Sweden and elsewhere. We recognize in the West, ordinary voters do at least, that if we are to have our own countries, if we are to maintain our way of life, then at the very least, we must be able to control who comes into our country and who exercises political right here. Unfortunately, the political elites from Washington to Brussels, everywhere in between and beyond, don't want the people of the West to have that right. And so they keep trying to ram bills such as this immigration proposal down our throats.
Yeah, I mean, quite clearly, the vast majority of Western leaders, whether that's in Europe, in the UK, or in the US, have at some point decided that they do not care for their own people's culture or personal safety and decided to just crack on with a load of illegal immigration anyway. And indeed, legal immigration as well. The numbers are absolutely ridiculous on that. Can I just ask you, there's a graph I've got in front of me here. So it just shows where the money goes for this bill, right? So Ukraine gets the highest amount with $60.1 billion. The states are getting a fraction of this, $20.2 billion. I mean, how can they even call this a border security bill? I just find it, surely Americans would rather have more of their taxpayers' money spent on their own issues. You know, Donald Trump said build a wall. You could build the Great Wall of China for this amount of money.
Of course. So this always happens in Washington. You'll get one policy priority that anyone cares about at all. That will receive the least amount of funding in the bill. And then the entrenched interests will cram all of their pet projects in there. The irony here is that the actual interest to the American people, which is curbing migration, that does not receive a red cent, actually, because all of the money set aside for it will actually be spent to expand immigration and to expand the powers of the Secretary of Homeland Security and to expand the powers of the president to let in more illegal aliens. And then the rest of it goes to perhaps the second least popular issue after mass migration, and that is this war in Ukraine that doesn't seem to have a strategic vision, that doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and that the American people are sick of sending their money to, where the money goes unaccountable, where the weapons go unaccountable, and where we don't achieve any strategic ends. So I think you've actually got to tip your hat to Washington, D.C. for coming up with a perfectly unpopular and disastrous bill.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of stuff that George Orwell would have had nightmares over, isn't it?